The Threxian Empire had enjoyed an unbroken reign over the galaxy for centuries. Its dominion stretched across thousands of systems, its fleet unmatched in firepower and efficiency. There was no question of Threxian supremacy. No rival had dared challenge their might in living memory. Peaceful and unwavering, the Empire held firm, its vessels patrolling the stars, safeguarding borders and expanding influence with the calculated precision of a machine. The heart of this great empire beat in Dasso, where Emperor Psylocke sat upon his throne, looking out over the tranquil pulse of his galaxy with a calm, cold gaze. From his palace, he observed the state of the galaxy, untouched and secure in his supreme control. Inside the war room, Commander Ra Vivek stood before a vast holographic display, his figure a proud silhouette against the glowing map of the Empire. A seasoned leader, Vivek was the very embodiment of the Empire's strength. His tactical mind had brought the Threxians countless victories, and his confidence in their dominance had never been shaken. To him, the galaxy was an equation of power, and the Threxians were the constant that made everything fall into place. Nothing, not a single threat, had ever been able to breach their vast defenses. It was this sense of invulnerability that gave the Emperor his peace, and it was the foundation of Vivek's arrogance. The Empire's fleet, under his leadership, had remained invincible for as long as anyone could remember. But then, in the far reaches of Threxian space, something unusual appeared, a blip on the sensors. A slight fluctuation in the fabric of space. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a simple sensor glitch, a minor anomaly that would soon vanish, just as so many others had before. Vivek, confident as ever, paid little mind to it. But as minutes passed, the anomaly didn't fade. Instead, it began to grow, expanding in size and intensity until it became impossible to ignore. The irregularities increased at an alarming rate. Commander Vivek's eyes narrowed as he studied the data, his sharp mind working to process what was happening. "Scan it," he ordered. The AI tactician, the ever-present voice of reason and data, responded promptly. "Analyzing. Anomaly is not decaying as expected. Irregular patterns detected. We are unable to determine its origin." "Could be another malfunction," Vivek muttered, though doubt lingered in his voice. Yet the longer the anomaly persisted, the less convinced he became of that explanation. The data wasn't making sense, and the anomaly was too consistent. It was growing, expanding outward like some unnatural force. Vivek's fingers hovered over the console, commanding the fleet to monitor the situation more closely. As the sensor readings intensified, something else appeared, something that shouldn't be there. Emerging from the rift, as though slicing through the fabric of space itself, was a colossal warship. It was unlike anything VVEC had ever seen. It wasn't a Threxian vessel, nor was it of any known design. Matte black and sleek, it hung in space like a shadow, its surface smooth and menacing. It was massive, at least 4 times the size of any Threxian dreadnought. "Is this one of ours?" Vivek asked, though the question had already formed an answer in his mind. It wasn't. The design was alien, completely foreign. The AI tactician's voice rang out, cold and clinical. "No, Commander. The design does not match any known registry. Dimensions: 2.44 kilometers in length. Mass: excessive. Weapon signatures are unpredictable." The words hung in the air like a weight, and for the first time, Vivek felt his confidence falter. His hands trembled slightly on the controls. He couldn't explain what he was seeing. It was as though reality itself was cracking in front of him. The warship didn't hail, didn't signal its intent. It simply existed, hanging there in space, silent and ominous. Vivek stared at the holographic image before him, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't space debris or a simple sensor glitch. This was a threat, a powerful, unknown force poised on the edges of their domain. He turned to his AI tactician, his mind racing. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "We will investigate. Bring the battle group into formation." The AI responded without hesitation. "Understood, Commander," initiating fleet maneuvers. As the fleet readied itself, Vika's heart raced in his chest. He couldn't shake the sense that something was terribly wrong. The universe, which had always seemed so predictable, was suddenly full of unknowns. His mind, once so certain, now clung to the edges of doubt. He wanted to believe this would be just another anomaly, another glitch in the system. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. And then, as if to answer his silent fears, the warship did something that would forever change the course of galactic history. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator testing the waters. Commander Vivik's disbelief began to crack. The strange ship wasn't a curiosity to be studied, it was a challenge, a powerful, unknown threat to everything the Threxian Empire stood for. As the massive vessel loomed on the edge of Threxian space, Vivi's heart raced. What had emerged from the depths of the rift was not a mere anomaly, it was humanity's first strike. The galaxy would never be the same. The strange warship hung in the void, silent and unmoving, like a nightmare made flesh. The rift from which it had emerged pulsed faintly, its edges flickering as though the very fabric of space was struggling to contain it. Commander Vivi stood frozen, his eyes locked on the massive matte-black ship, feeling a strange mix of awe and dread. The Imperial fleet had formed a defensive perimeter around the anomaly, yet the unknown warship made no move, only waited. It was not like any adversary they had ever encountered, and that, in itself, was the most terrifying part. "Commander," the AI tactician spoke, its voice calm, detached, but Vivek could sense the underlying urgency in the cold, calculated tone. "The ship's power readings are off the scale. No known technology has ever matched this level of energy emission." Vec gritted his teeth, trying to mask the fear that began to simmer beneath the surface. His years of experience, his pride in the Empire, told him not to fear a mere ship, yet everything about this vessel screamed of something beyond his comprehension. "We've never seen anything like this," Viv muttered, his voice barely audible. He glanced around the bridge, his crew silent, their faces a mix of confusion and unease. Even the AI seemed more agitated than usual, its typically crisp responses laced with something approaching caution. The Emperor had yet to speak, but V could sense the weight of his gaze from the palace. Silox, the cold-hearted ruler of the Threxian Empire, was accustomed to dominating the galaxy, to quashing any sign of rebellion with swift and brutal force. But this was not a rebellion. This was something else entirely. "Commander," the AI continued, "the anomaly is now growing exponentially. We are detecting an unprecedented gravitational shift." "What does that mean?" Vik asked, frustration beginning to seep into his words. "It means," the AI replied, "that the ship's gravitational field is interacting with space-time itself. It is as though it is bending the very laws of physics to suit its purpose." For a moment, there was only silence on the bridge as the reality of the situation settled over them. If the black veil, as it was now known, after being analyzed by the AI, was capable of manipulating space-time, then the implications were staggering. It could move faster than light, tear through space, and potentially displace entire star systems. All of it beyond the Threxian Empire's understanding. "Commander," the AI said again, this time with a note of urgency, "we've detected an incoming signal. It's not a transmission, it's a warning." A chill ran down Vivi's spine. He had never experienced anything quite like this before. Every fiber of his being screamed to attack, to destroy this threat before it could strike. But every logical part of him warned that they were facing something far more dangerous than any foe the Empire had ever encountered. "Patch it through," Vish ordered, his voice rough with tension. The bridge fell silent as a clear, cold voice filled the command room. It was low, steady, and chilling in its simplicity. "This system is under human quarantine. Your expansion ends here. Leave human space. There will be no second warning." The words echoed across the bridge, and for the first time in VV's career, he felt completely powerless. The message was not just a declaration. It was an ultimatum, a command. The Threxian Empire, with all its might, was being told to leave, to retreat. And worse, it was being told by a species that had been forgotten, dismissed as irrelevant. A species that the Threxians had assumed would never again challenge their dominance. VV stood motionless, his mind racing. The word human lingered in the air. They were supposed to be a primitive, aggressive race weak, unworthy of the Empire's attention. And yet, here they were, sending a ship of unimaginable power, capable of crushing an entire fleet with the mere flick of a switch. Is this some kind of trick? Vec muttered, mostly to himself. There's no way this could be human. They're supposed to be extinct. The AI responded, its voice calm but with a hint of trepidation. Analysis confirms the source of the transmission, human origin. No known counterfeits detected. Vec's hands gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but one thing was becoming painfully clear. Humanity was back. Not only back, but far more dangerous than anyone had ever anticipated. The ship, the Black Veil, had made its intent clear. This was not a negotiation. This was not a warning shot. This was an announcement, an arrival. And it had no plans to leave until the galaxy understood one irrefutable fact. Humanity had returned to take its place among the stars. "Sir," an officer's voice broke the silence, trembling slightly. "5 of our patrol ships have just vanished." Vec's heart skipped a beat. He turned sharply. "What do you mean, vanished?" "There was no warning," the officer stammered. "No explosions, no projectiles, just heat and nothing." "They're gone," Vivek's mind raced. His tactical mind was spinning with possibilities, each darker than the last. This was no ordinary enemy. This was not a fleet that could be outmaneuvered or outgunned. This was a force that didn't need to fight, it simply erased its enemies from existence. "Get the fleet into position," Vivek ordered, his voice sharper now, the first hint of panic creeping into his calm demeanor. "Ready the dreadnoughts. Prepare for battle." But deep down, Vik knew that nothing he did could prepare them for what was coming. The Empire's greatest strength had always been its overwhelming force, its sheer numbers and technology. But now, it was facing an opponent that didn't care for numbers or technology. It cared only for one thing, domination. And as the ship hovered in space, as the Black Veil remained silent and unyielding, one truth became clear to Vivek. This war would not be fought with fleets or missiles. It would be fought with fear, and humanity had mastered it. The battle was not unfolding as Commander Ra Vec had expected. There was no dramatic assault, no desperate attempts at retaliation, no engagement of any kind. Instead, the Threxian fleet, once a symbol of unquestioned superiority, had been reduced to a panicked, disordered mess. 5 patrol ships just gone, obliterated in an instant. And now, the looming shadow of the Black Veil hung in space, motionless, its presence suffocating the very air around the Threxian vessels. Vivek stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the viewport as the massive warship remained an imposing silhouette against the stars. His hands clenched into fists. The ship had not fired a single shot. It had not moved, not even slightly. Yet, with each passing second, its power seemed to grow. And so did his fear. "Commander," the AI tactician spoke again, this time with more urgency than before. "We are detecting further gravitational anomalies. The warship's gravitational field is affecting local space. If it continues, we risk destabilizing entire sectors." Vik turned sharply toward the holographic display, his mind racing. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and his mind struggled to process what was happening. This was no longer a simple skirmish or threat to be neutralized. This was a warship beyond anything they could comprehend, a power that defied the very laws of physics. The galaxy, once under the firm control of the Threxian Empire, was now teetering on the brink of something far darker. "Redirect our course," Vivek barked, his voice full of frustration. "We're not just going to sit here and wait to be erased. Prepare all dreadnoughts for battle." But even as he spoke, he knew it wouldn't matter. The black veil had shown its hand, and whatever it had done to wipe out the 5 ships was only the beginning. Viva's mind flickered back to the moment when the fleet first engaged. He had seen the flash, the sudden burst of energy, like the sun itself had been momentarily extinguished. The patrol ships had simply ceased to exist, leaving only empty space behind them. He swallowed hard, fighting the urge to allow panic to seep into his voice. The crew on the bridge was as stiff as stone, their eyes glued to their consoles, but their faces betrayed the growing terror that gripped them all. For all their training, all their weapons, all their arrogance, they were facing an enemy that didn't need to fight. The black veil didn't even have to lift a finger. It could wipe them from the universe with the simplest of gestures. This, Vivek realized, was no ordinary battle. This was a reckoning. "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the Emperor," the communications officer said, her voice strained. Vivek's stomach tightened. He didn't want to face Psylocke right now, not like this. Not when they were on the verge of utter defeat. But the call was inevitable. The Emperor's presence, though always distant and cold, was still the beating heart of the Empire. He had to be told, though the consequences of the truth. Patch it through. Vec ordered, his voice grim. The hologram of Emperor Psylocke materialized before him, his regal figure appearing as always calm, calculated, a symbol of absolute control. But now, something was different. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his cold, calculating eyes. Vec had seen it only once before, years ago, when a rival fleet had managed to get close enough to threaten Threxian space. But that had been swiftly dealt with. This, however, was different. The Emperor knew it, and Vifin knew it too. "What is the situation, Commander?" Psylocke demanded, his voice as smooth and icy as ever. Vivi hesitated for a moment before responding. There was no easy way to put it. The truth could not be sugar-coated. "We've lost 5 ships, vaporized without a trace. There are no explosions, no debris, just gone. And the enemy ship has yet to make any attempt at direct aggression. It remains silent, but it's continuing to grow in power. We believe it has the ability to manipulate space-time itself." Psylocke's expression didn't change, but the tension was palpable. He had always prided himself on his unshakable control. To be faced with an unknown enemy like this, an enemy that didn't fit any known pattern, was a blow to his pride. "How long until we can engage?" Psylocke asked, his voice clipped, calculating. Vivek swallowed. "We can't engage, sire. Not like this. It's not fighting us, it's erasing us. The Black Veil is not like any ship we've ever encountered." The words hung in the air, a cold truth neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Silence stretched out between them, each man lost in the realization that their galaxy, their civilization, was on the verge of collapse, not by war, but by something incomprehensible. Psylocke's cold gaze sharpened. Then I have no choice. Prepare the Imperial fleet for a full offensive. If we cannot overcome it, then we will have no other option but to retreat. Vec nodded, though a sense of hopelessness gnawed at him. Understood, my Emperor. But I fear we are not prepared for what this ship represents. Before the Emperor could respond, a voice cut through the comms, a sharp, biting message that would forever change the course of the battle. This system is under human quarantine. Your expansion ends here. The voice crackled across the bridge, sending a shockwave through every officer present. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. Humanity had spoken, and they had spoken with power that one had anticipated. Commander Vivek's mind reeled as the realization slammed into him with brutal force. The galaxy was no longer Threxian. Humans of all species had returned, and they were not here to negotiate. His mind reeled. He turned to face his crew, his expression grim. Prepare for the unthinkable, he muttered, barely audible over the commotion. But deep down, he knew that no amount of preparation could shield them from what was coming. The Black Veil had made its entrance, and it was only the beginning. The aftermath of the Black Veil's silent annihilation hung over the Threxian fleet like a dark cloud. Panic and confusion had swept through their ranks, but now, as the dust settled and the shock began to fade, something worse was taking hold. The realization had begun to set in. They were no longer masters of the galaxy. Their once great empire, built on the belief that it was invincible, was suddenly on the defensive, facing an adversary unlike any they had ever encountered. Commander. Vec paced back and forth in the war room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The remnants of the Threxian fleet were scattered, retreating to their core systems, trying to regroup. His mind raced, trying to find any strategic advantage, any way to claw back some semblance of control. But the more he thought about it, the more impossible that seemed. We cannot outrun it, Vivek muttered to himself, his voice thick with frustration. We can't fight it, and there's nowhere to hide. The Black Veil had proven itself a force of nature. The 5 patrol ships that had vanished were the first taste of what humanity was capable of. But what terrified Vivek more than the losses themselves was the way the Black Veil had conducted its assault. There had been no grand display, no blaring alarms or warning shots. The human ship hadn't fired a single missile or laser. It had merely erased entire ships from existence, as if the Threxian fleet hadn't mattered at all. And now it was still out there, hovering in the vast emptiness of space. Vec had ordered the fleet to retreat to a nearby system, hoping that distance would give them time to recover, to regroup. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The Black Veil didn't need to chase them. It could obliterate them from afar. A single shot, a single strike, and the Threxian fleet would cease to exist. Humanity had proven that they didn't need to engage in traditional warfare. They could break the Empire without firing a single shot. Commander, the voice of the AI tactician broke through his thoughts. We've detected another anomaly. It appears to be coming from the Black Veil. Vic's eyes snapped to the screen. Another anomaly? His pulse quickened. The first one had been bad enough, but another? What did it mean? Show me, he barked, his voice sharp. The hologram flickered, and a new image appeared. The Black Veil was still at the center of it, but now something else was happening. A distortion in space, like a rippling wave, was emanating from the ship, spreading outwards. It looked as though the very fabric of the universe itself was bending, warping, and twisting in response to the warship's presence. Explain this, Vivek demanded. I am unable to analyze it fully, Commander, the AI said, its usual detached voice now betraying a hint of uncertainty. But it appears that the Black Veil is creating some kind of space-time distortion. It's as if the ship is manipulating reality itself. The anomaly is expanding, and it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. Vik clenched his fists, his mind working frantically. What are they doing? The AI paused, then spoke again, its voice tinged with dread. I believe they are altering the very laws of physics around them. If they continue, it could destabilize the entire region. The distortion is growing by the minute. The implications of that hit Vivek like a physical blow. A weapon that could bend space-time, manipulate gravity, and distort reality at will, it was beyond comprehension. This wasn't just a ship. It was a harbinger of chaos, a force capable of unraveling the very fabric of the galaxy. Can we counteract it? Vek's voice was low, barely a whisper as the enormity of the situation took hold. The AI hesitated. There is no known defense against this type of anomaly. It is beyond our current understanding. Vivek's heart sank. The Threxian Empire, the greatest military power in the galaxy, was powerless against this. The fear that had been slowly growing in the pit of his stomach now consumed him entirely. This wasn't a battle they could win. The Black Veil wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, an engine of destruction that could unravel the very foundation of their world. Commander, we are receiving a new transmission, the communications officer said, her voice strained. It's a direct message from the Black Veil. Vek felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had hoped, briefly, that perhaps humanity would let them retreat in peace. But the silence, the calm, had been deceptive. The Black Veil wasn't just watching them, it was taunting them. Put it through, VVEC ordered, his voice tight with restraint. The voice that crackled through the speakers was cold, emotionless, and utterly devoid of mercy. This system is now under human quarantine. All Threxian forces are to leave immediately. There will be no second warning. The message was simple, and yet it carried a weight that pressed down on every Threxian present. The threat was clear, unmistakable. There would be no negotiation, no peace. Humanity had made its move, and the Empire was powerless to stop it. Vivek turned away from the screen, his mind spinning. The Threxian fleet was in disarray. Their best ships had been destroyed in an instant. The Black Veil was toying with them, demonstrating its power in ways that defied reason. And the Emperor, Silox, remained silent, likely stunned into paralysis by the scale of the threat. Vik had no doubt that his ruler would demand action, demand retaliation, but what good would it do? The Black Veil had already proven that it could destroy them with a single thought. A soft beep from the tactical console brought him back to reality. A new report. Commander, the officer said hesitantly, the gravitational anomaly. It's worsening. We have less than 30 minutes before it reaches critical mass. Critical mass? Vivek echoed, his voice shaking. What happens then? The officer looked up, her face pale. If the anomaly continues to expand at this rate, it will destabilize the entire sector. Entire star systems could collapse. We might not survive. Vik's mind whirled as he processed the information. The entire sector gone. The very stars themselves consumed by the anomaly. In the face of such unimaginable power, it became clear. This was no longer a fight for survival. This was the end of everything they knew. Humanity had come, and they had done the impossible. They had shattered the galaxy's status quo, and there was nothing the Threxian Empire could do to stop it. The bridge of the Crown Dominion had never been so silent. The hum of the engines, the chatter of officers, everything had been swallowed up by the overwhelming presence of the Black Veil. Commander Rav Vivek stood motionless, staring at the display. The Black Veil had made its intentions clear. The voice had been cold, efficient, but it carried with it a finality that left no room for debate. This system is now under human quarantine. All Threxian forces are to leave immediately. There will be no second warning. The message had been short, but its impact was devastating. Vik could almost feel the weight of it pressing down on him, suffocating him. For the first time in his long career, he felt utterly powerless. The entire might of the Threxian Empire, its fleets, its greatest warships, nothing mattered against the human warship that loomed at the edge of their space. We can't retreat. Vivek muttered to himself. We can't negotiate. What are we supposed to do now? Commander, the II tactician's voice cut through his thoughts. The gravitational anomaly is spreading. It has now reached critical mass. If it continues expanding at this rate, it will destabilize all systems within range. Vek's mind raced. He had been trying to avoid considering the consequences of that. He couldn't afford to. The implications were too vast, too dangerous. The Black Veil was not just threatening to destroy their fleet, it was threatening to collapse entire star systems. The magnitude of what they were up against felt like an abyss. If the Black Veil wasn't stopped, nothing would survive. Not just Threxia, but everything. We can't just sit here, Vivek finally said, his voice low but filled with growing determination. We need a plan, a counterattack, something. This is no longer just about defeating a ship. This is about saving the galaxy. We cannot counter the effects of the anomaly, the AI responded. It is unlike anything in our database. The gravitational distortion is affecting our engines, and the Black Veil's power is only escalating. Our weapons cannot breach its shields. Our best efforts so far have resulted in failure. Vek clenched his fists. The ice-cold, logical tone only made the situation more unbearable. He had always believed in the Empire's might, in its overwhelming firepower. He had believed that no force in the galaxy could challenge them. Yet now, the Black Veil was an unstoppable force, and no amount of Threxian ingenuity could defeat it. Send the message, Vivek said, his voice low but resolute. We need to speak to the Emperor. Far away, within the confines of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Silox paced restlessly in his private chambers. The message had stunned him, knocked him off balance in a way he rarely allowed himself to. The galaxy, which had bent to the will of the Threxian Empire for centuries, was now challenging their very existence. He had never thought such a day would come. The face of the Emperor was cold and regal as always, yet a certain tension had crept into his expression. The Black Veil was not merely an enemy, it was an extinction-level threat. And it had not come with armies or fleets. It had come with a single ship, leaving the entire Threxian military in a state of complete disarray. Your Imperial Highness, a voice interrupted his thoughts. A high-ranking aide entered, his face pale. The commander is on the line. He says it's urgent. Patch him through, Silox said, though the edge in his voice betrayed the unease he felt. The holographic image of Vivek in front of him, his face taut, his expression grim. Commander, report, Silox ordered. We're facing an enemy unlike any we've ever encountered. My Emperor, Vivek began, his voice steady but filled with a rare vulnerability. The Black Veil has already decimated 5 of our patrol ships. We can't even engage. It manipulates space-time, gravity, reality itself. It's causing a gravitational anomaly that could destroy entire star systems. Our fleet is in disarray. And worse still, the human vessel has issued a quarantine order. It's clear now, we're not fighting for our survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of the galaxy. Silox stood still, the weight of the words sinking in. You say the anomaly will destabilize entire systems? His voice was quiet but firm. How long do we have? Vek hesitated before responding, knowing the truth was more damning than he had yet shared. We have less than an hour. If we don't stop it now, the entire region could collapse into a singularity. We'll be powerless to prevent it." Psylocke's expression hardened. For the first time in his rule, he was faced with a threat that no amount of force or strategy could resolve. His galaxy was teetering on the brink of destruction. The Threxian Empire was no longer the predator. It was the prey. "We've never faced anything like this," Psylocke said, his voice more to himself than to Vivek. "Are we to surrender?" "No," Vivek replied sharply. "We don't surrender, but we need to act quickly. We need to find a way to neutralize the black veil and its anomaly before it consumes everything." Psylocke fell silent, staring at the projection of Vivek as if searching for an answer that wasn't there. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and resolute, as if trying to regain his composure. "Commander, do what you must. But remember this. The Threxian Empire does not bow to any force. We will not be erased. We will fight, and we will reclaim our place in the galaxy." Vic didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked toward the holographic display of the black veil in front of him, its cold, featureless surface mocking him with its silent power. "You've made your choice, my Emperor," VVEC said softly. "But I fear that this time, our might won't be enough." The black veil remained where it was, untouched by the turmoil unfolding around it. It didn't chase or engage. It simply watched, a silent force that dwarfed everything in its path. The human ship had proven its power, and now it was clear. Humanity wasn't just a forgotten relic of history. They had evolved. And now they were shaping the future of the galaxy. The Emperor, once the unquestioned ruler, had made his decision. He had ordered his fleet to fight. But what he didn't realize, what none of the Threxian leaders realized, was that the fight had already been decided. The Black Veil wasn't interested in negotiation. It wasn't interested in battle. It was interested in one thing only: control. And the galaxy would now see how humanity would rule. As the Threxian fleet readied itself for another engagement, as officers scurried to their posts and the remaining ships prepared for battle, one thing was clear. No matter how hard they fought, no matter how many ships they sent to the front lines, the Black Veil would remain a shadow, a harbinger of humanity's rise, and there would be no second warning. The tension on the bridge of the Crown Dominion was suffocating. It had been less than an hour since Commander Ra Vek had received the chilling confirmation from the Emperor. The fleet was to engage, and there would be no turning back, yet. Even now, as Vivek stood at the helm, his mind was clouded with doubt. The Black Veil had already made its intentions known. 5 ships had been reduced to nothing more than empty space. The Black Veil had not fired a single shot it hadn't needed to. And now, as the gravitational anomaly continued to expand across the sector, the Threxian fleet found itself in a race against time to prevent complete collapse. "Commander, we are approaching the critical zone," the AI tactician said, its voice once again void of emotion, but for Vivek, it only added to the dread building in his chest. The Black Veil had triggered an irreversible event. There was no going back now. Vivek's eyes darted between the displays, every ship, every data point telling the same story. The gravitational field was intensifying, and within moments, the entire region would begin to collapse into a singularity. If that happened, the Empire's best ships would be reduced to nothing. The fleet would be scattered, torn apart like tissue paper, and the remnants would be left adrift in space, doomed to be lost in the dark void. The galaxy itself would be torn asunder, with entire star systems falling into oblivion. Vivek clenched his fists and took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "Status report on fleet positioning," he demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "We're in position, Commander." the communications officer said, her voice tight with anxiety. "The dreadnoughts are ready to launch, but we haven't received confirmation from all commanders yet. Some ships are experiencing gravitational anomalies that are interfering with their systems." VVEC cursed under his breath. The black veil was warping reality itself, and now it was disrupting their fleet's capabilities. Their weapons were ineffective, their navigation systems unreliable. This wasn't a battle they could win through sheer force. It was becoming painfully clear that humanity wasn't playing by the same rules. Their technology, whatever it was, had transcended the boundaries of known physics. He glanced at the viewport, where the black, ominous shape of the black veil still hovered, unyielding and silent. There was no sign of movement, no attempt at communication. It didn't need to speak. It didn't need to declare war. Its very existence was a declaration, a reminder that Threxian power was no longer absolute. "Commander, I have another transmission from the Black Veil," the officer reported. The word transmission hung in the air like an insult. Every word from that ship felt like another layer of humiliation for the Empire. Still, there was no avoiding it. "Patch it through," Vivek replied, his voice low and hard. The voice that came through was the same as before, cold, controlled, emotionless. "This system is under human quarantine. Threxian forces are to retreat immediately. You have been warned." There was something about the finality in that voice that struck Vec to his core. It wasn't a plea for peace. It wasn't an offer of negotiation. It was an ultimatum. And this time, it wasn't an empty threat. Vivek stood still, staring at the transmission with a growing sense of dread. The Black Veil didn't need to fight. It had made that much clear from the beginning. It didn't care for diplomacy. It didn't care for treaties. The Black Veil was an instrument of control, and humanity was wielding it with an authority that made the Threxian Empire seem like an insignificant afterthought. "Commander," the AI said, breaking the silence, "the anomaly's expansion is accelerating. We are running out of time." Vivi's mind snapped back to reality. "Prepare the fleet for FTL. We'll make a final push," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "We must fight or we risk everything." The officers around him exchanged uneasy glances. Even now, with the certainty of their impending destruction, no one was willing to defy their orders outright. But in their eyes, Vivi saw the same realization that had slowly crept into his mind over the past few hours. They were outclassed. They were outmatched. This fight, whatever it was, wasn't just a loss, it was extinction. "Commander," the AI continued, "I'm detecting a fluctuation in the Black Veil's power grid. It is preparing to escalate its effects. The anomaly is about to reach a tipping point. We have approximately 30 minutes before the first systems begin to collapse." 30 minutes. Vivek turned toward the tactical officer. "Can we disable the Black Veil using our graviton disruptors?" The officer shook her head. "The power emitted by the Black Veil is too strong. Our disruptors can't cut through its shields. We can't even get a lock on it. Whatever's inside that ship, it's a different kind of force." Vik's mind raced. He had always believed that the Empire's strength was enough to hold off any threat, whether through overwhelming force, strategic dominance, or sheer willpower. But now it was clear. The Black Veil was not a threat in the traditional sense. It was an inevitability. Humanity's return wasn't about regaining control of a lost territory. It was about rewriting the rules of power itself. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we've received another message. This time, it's directed to all Threxian fleets." Vec's heart skipped a beat. "Put it through." The voice of the Black Veil's commander rang out once again, cold and unyielding. "You have 30 minutes. After that, there will be no more warnings. Leave human space or face annihilation. The finality of the words echoed in VVX's mind. 30 minutes. That was all they had left before everything began to fall apart. His hands trembled as he grasped the edge of the console. He could hear the quiet, steady breathing of his crew around him. No one was speaking. Everyone was waiting for something, anything, to break the tension, but nothing came. The cold reality was too overwhelming. "We cannot fight this," Vivek muttered, his voice barely audible. "We can't win. We can't even understand it." There was a long pause, and then, from the officer at the far end of the room, a quiet voice broke the silence. "Commander, what if we surrender?" The question hung in the air like a confession. Vik stared at the officer, his mind racing. Was surrender the only way out? Was this the end of the Threxian Empire? The once proud galaxy reduced to nothing more than a footnote in a history rewritten by humanity? Vik didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the holographic image of the black veil, its dark, foreboding shape looming over them all. What did surrender even mean in the face of such power? If humanity could control the very laws of space itself, could the Threxian Empire ever hope to rebuild? The answer, as Vivek finally realized, wasn't about fighting or surrendering. It was about survival, and the Black Veil had already decided their fate. The final moments before the collapse of the Threxian Empire were almost eerily silent. The Crown Dominion had already fallen back to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The remaining fleet scattered, desperately trying to outmaneuver the gravitational anomalies caused by the Black Veil. Vivek stood at the heart of his ship's command center, the holographic screens around him flickering with constant updates, each more dire than the last. The tension was palpable, each officer bracing themselves for the inevitable. They had 30 minutes left. Vivek could already feel the weight of the impending collapse. The Black Veil was still hovering at the edge of the system, its silent presence a constant reminder that humanity had come and that the game had changed forever. There had been no battle, no dramatic showdown, no glorious last stand. What had happened was far worse. Humans had proven that they didn't need to fight. They didn't need to engage. They didn't need to do anything. They simply were. And now, the Empire had nothing left but the bitter knowledge that they had been outclassed, outhot, and outgunned. "Commander." The AI tactician's voice broke through the silence, sounding almost as tired as the crew around him. "The gravitational anomaly is reaching critical mass. The first systems will begin to collapse within the next 5 minutes. We can no longer hold this position. The fleet must continue to retreat or we risk total destruction." Vec turned toward the display, his eyes scanning the map. The anomaly, once a mere fluctuation on the sensors, had now become a force in its own right, growing stronger, expanding faster. It was like a wound in the fabric of space, a jagged tear that was spreading across the galaxy. And at the heart of it was the Black Veil. Humanity had created a singularity of influence, one that no amount of Threxian power could overcome. He felt his chest tighten. The notion of retreat, of surrender, was anathema to him, to the very core of everything the Empire had stood for. But what was the alternative? How could they hope to fight something that could bend the laws of nature itself? "Sir," the officer manning communications spoke, her voice shaky but firm. "We've received another message." "From the Black Veil." Vec closed his eyes for a moment. What more could they possibly say? There were no more threats left to make. The message would be simple, cold, and final, just like all the others. "Put it through," he said, his voice barely a whisper, as though he already knew the words that would come. The voice that emanated from the speaker was calm, impassive. It was almost disorienting how little emotion it carried. It was the same voice that had haunted their every moment since the beginning. the voice of the human ship that had undone them. "This is the final warning," it said, cutting through the air like a blade. "Leave human space or face the Tsevdi." Consequences. VVEC stood motionless, unable to respond. This was it. There was no fight left in him. The Black Veil had already won, not with weapons, not with fleets, but by redefining what it meant to wield power. In the face of humanity's silent strength, Threxia had no place, no future. The sound of a soft beeping interrupted the silence. The officer at the communications station turned to Vivek, her face pale. "Commander, the anomaly has begun to destabilize the core systems. The collapse is imminent. We need to make the call." For the first time, Vivek felt the weight of the feed of the felate of the time, Vivu, decision he had been avoiding. His mind raced as he looked at the faces of his crew, his officers, his comrades, all of them who had stood beside him in countless battles, who had followed his command unquestioningly. He had been their leader, their strength. And now he had to be the one to lead them into the final battle, a battle not for victory, but for survival. "Prepare the fleet for immediate FTL jump," he said, his voice cold and determined. "We're leaving this system. We're not going to let this anomaly consume us." But as he gave the order, he knew that their retreat wasn't an act of survival, it was an act of defeat. They were running, not from a fleet, but from a force, so immense, so incomprehensible, that they could never have prepared for it. The Black Veil wasn't just a ship. It was a herald of something far more terrifying, the quiet, relentless rise of a species that had been underestimated for too long. As the fleet began its retreat, Vega couldn't help but feel the weight of history bearing down on him. The galaxy would never be the same. The Threxian Empire, for all its power, for all its glory, was finished. They had been defeated not by brute force, but by humanity's unwavering will to dominate. The Black Veil remained an unyielding shadow in the distance. It was a reminder that Earth was not some backwater planet lost to history. It was a force to be reckoned with, a species that had bided its time, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, the galaxy would remember humanity not for its military might, but for its quiet, unshakable resolve. Vivek stood at the viewport, staring into the vast, empty space beyond. The stars were still, their light unchanged. But to him, everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer under Threxian control. The galaxy was humanity's to shape, and as the last of the Threxian ships jumped into FTL, VVEC knew that this was not an end. This was the beginning of something new. A new chapter in the galaxy's history, one where humanity would stand as its silent ruler. He took one last look at the Black Veil, its dark form a reminder of the inevitable future. Then, with a heavy heart, he turned away, knowing that the Empire would never recover from this.